Thank you, Peter, for the talk. Next, I would like to bring on Professor Barry Rolett, who is a professor of anthropology at the University of Hawaii, and he will speak on the topic of historical interactions between human civilization and the monsoon.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Let me figure this out. I guess I'll stand here, that would be good. All right, so I wanted to emphasize with this, with the photo here of in the field that I'm an archaeologist, not a geologist, and I have a different perspective on the results of the geological research which has been presented, and there's a lot of room for sort of cross-fertilization among the different fields, science and archaeology. And what archaeology can bring to the discussion then is the ability to be able to ask the question, how have abrupt climate changes in the past influenced cultures? And archaeology can look at this in a time scale that other fields of history cannot. And so with paleoclimate research, we can reconstruct what happened at different periods of time. And in certain parts of the world, there are historical records, including in China, that allow us to try to match the paleoclimate record with the historical record and see what happened and try to get an idea of what the implications are. One of the things which has been one of the most exciting developments of the last 15, 20 years or so, certainly since the time that I've been teaching at the University of Hawaii, is that we used to think that climate change was relatively gradual. Okay? And now we know that there are periods when it was decidedly abrupt. And so the breakthroughs that Peter, Clift, and his colleagues, others at the conference here, have been involved in, allow us to date the timing of those changes, the magnitude of those changes, and to show that abrupt climate change happened. We can pin it down, we can time it, okay? And if we can match the timing of those events to historical records, then we get an idea of how people have adjusted to those events. Now, adaptation, okay, is something that we are good at. Okay? In fact, anthropologists who teach human evolution like to say that adaptation to change, in fact, is the essence of being human. And if you look at biological evolution, okay, we are adapted to changes. We came out of the trees. We adapted to a terrestrial lifestyle. So we changed. And in fact, it's been argued that as this happened, in Africa in relation to some major changes in the climate, which changed the landscape from a forested one to a more grassland, sort of savanna type landscape. But the point here is that if there's anything that sets us apart as a species, it's our ability to adapt. This is what anthropologists will tell you. But what we don't know is how much and how fast we can adapt. And we are in a very, we're heading into sort of unknown territory now in terms of an experiment in a global abrupt climate change. And so, we know there have been many natural events in the past, okay? But this is the first time, okay, that we have a man-made climatic event. Okay, we're the ones driving this change, and the magnitude of it it's not, completely unparalleled in the past, but it's a fairly amazing change. And so if you look at the chart here, what this shows is change over time in CO2 emissions. And you can see that, I don't know I think the time is like 20, maybe 30 years or so on this scale. But if you look, the United States reached high levels of CO2 emissions a long time ago, and we've been fairly stable along that path, okay? But what's surprising then is if you compare the rate of American CO2 emissions with those from China, and you can see increasing a little bit, and then all of a sudden taking off at this astronomical rate of increase, which is continuing as we speak. And so the question is, what is that going to do? What are the consequences? And how are we going to be able to adapt to that? And can we do that? So what can we learn from the past? Okay, there's a lot of sort of mutual interest among paleoclimate scientists and archaeologists trying to understand what has happened and what we can learn from that. So I'm just going to highlight very quickly a few of the case studies then that were presented at this American Geological Union Chapman conference, and to give you an idea of what we know. One of the best documented cases of abrupt climate change and the consequences comes from the rise and the fall of the Maya. And this is very interesting. So, and again, it shows the way that climate change can inform history. So if you look at this, all the squiggles, all the this chart here. It's actually, let's see if I can get this right. It's actually quite interesting. So the blue line here shows change in rainfall over time as it's been measured through these proxies, these climatic proxies that Peter described. And so you can see, so the blue, this shows changes in time. This is high rainfall, this is low rainfall. The purple, okay, shows the number of war-related events which were recorded, okay, in stela, which are stone slabs associated with Maya ceremonial centers. So the Maya had a calendar, okay, which was as good or as better than our calendar. They were obsessed with a time. They recorded historical events, including the births and the deaths of kings, but also wars, the construction of different monuments, things like this. So we have an annual historical record which can be compared then with the climatic record. So what we have here then is the number of war events that are recorded in these Maya ceremonial sites. And then in the orange, we have the number of monuments that were built. Okay, so this is sort of construction. And so what you see when you put this together is that the so-called classic period, the rise of Maya civilization, which occurred over a period of about 500 years, you can see that the rise of Maya civilization occurred during a period of very favorable climatic conditions. So higher than average rainfall, and then it falls off rather abruptly. Okay, and as soon as the rainfall starts to, we start to get into these wild fluctuations and basically drought-like conditions. As soon as that happens, we see there's a fall off in the construction. The construction of the Maya ceremonial centers stops. This is because people are moving out of those ceremonial centers. They're abandoning them. And at the same time, we see that the movement out of the cities is connected then to the beginning of a war and conflict between them. So the way this is interpreted then is that because we're talking about a population of 10 million people then in the Maya area, which is close to or more than the modern population of that area. It was a very dense population in a small area. And so the idea then is that with the traditional agricultural practices, the favorable rainfall then allowed for the growth, the rise of the Maya Empire, and the abrupt change in climate then caused the agricultural systems to fail and led to the decline, the collapse of the Maya. So this was one of the first sort of case studies in which archaeologists and historians then were able to make a very close connection between the paleoclimate record and the historical record. And there are two other case studies, both of which, both here in East Asia, which I'm just going to mention briefly, that also sort of highlight the significance of all of this. And so in the case of the expansion of the Mongol Empire, and this was one of the case studies came up at the conference, if you match the climatic record then with the invasion of the Mongols into China, and of course at their peak the Mongol Empire was the largest the world has ever known. But if you match this with the climatic record, then actually what we see is that this occurred during a relatively short period. I mean, the big push was during a 25-year period, okay, when favorable climatic conditions, relatively high rainfall, allowed the expansion of the grasslands, and of course, the Mongols, okay, depended upon horses, and the horses, okay, depended upon the grasslands. So the favorable climatic conditions then set the stage for the Mongol invasion of China. Okay. Another case study, one which Peter touched upon today, is that of Angkor civilization. And here, when we compare the climatic record, the historical one, we see that it wasn't simply a question of drought or heavy rainfall, but it was a combination of both. And Angkor was a city-state that was built around hydraulic engineering, okay? So it's surrounded by these reservoirs and moats. So it was a combination. It's been argued then that that hydraulic system was built in one climatic regime, but not adapted then for the later changes, both intense flooding and drought that came later in Angkor history. And it's been suggested then that the civilization simply couldn't handle those rapid swings. They tried to develop a way to adapt to it, but were unsuccessful. Again, we have a case similar to that of the Maya, where we have one of the greatest civilizations of the world that could not adapt to climate change. So in a sense then, what I've given you then are three case studies, two in which two of the greatest civilizations the world has known were not able to adapt to civilization, and in fact are not very important on the world stage today, and a third case study in which favorable climatic events allowed for the expansion. So the takeaway points here, just very briefly, first of all, East Asia matters, okay, in terms of climate change and abrupt climate change. East Asia is, in many ways, one of the parts of the world which is going to be affected most strongly by the coming changes. There are both opportunities and challenges. Okay, Genghis Khan seized an amazing opportunity. There's another separate study that argues that Genghis Khan left more than 16 million descendants, one of the most prolific individuals in the human species. So opportunity and challenges. Then finally, the idea of adaptation. Okay, yes, we need to adapt. Take it with a grain of salt. Think about it carefully, because there's adaptation and there's also maladaptation. Sometimes what we try to do, the solutions to the problems that we come up with, turn out to be more harmful than helpful in the future. So it is an important topic for discussion. It is something that we should be thinking about. Thank you.